Hi, everyone. This is Chris Campbell, and welcome to the Food Institute podcast. This week, we'll be discussing what emerging food trends could become most important in the next 5 years, according to students at Cornell University. But before we get started, I'd like to thank everyone who's been listening to the podcast and ask that you share this episode with your friends and family. In addition to the Food Institute website, we're now available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. So please subscribe, like, and share as this really extends our reach. So thank you again. And if there's another platform you'd like to see the show on, please let us know and we'll see what we can do to get us on there. So like I said at the beginning of the show, we partnered with Cornell University's Daniel Williams Hooker to survey just over 60 students participating in the school's food programs in order to get a better idea of what food industry students believe will be important in the years to come. We asked students 10 questions regarding food trends over the next 5 years on a sliding 1 to 5 scale, with 5 representing the maximum importance. Additionally, we provided 5 multiple choice questions on targeted sectors to get a better idea on what could be important. While I wouldn't classify this survey as definitive, I do think it gives us a snapshot into the thinking of these emerging food leaders. But before we introduce these emerging food leaders, I thought it would be smart to introduce their leader, Professor Hooker. I asked Professor Hooker to introduce himself in a few words.
I teach the dynamics of the food industry and consumer packaged goods. And I also have 27-year career in the food industry in all aspects of the business, from product ideation to all the way to shelf. And I'm just lucky to be back with these great students that are joining me today on this podcast. So let them introduce themselves. I'll kick it over to Sonia. Hi, Sonia.
Hi, my name is Sonja. I'm currently an exchange student here at Cornell. I'm originally from Germany and doing my master's here. It's called a STEMS master. And we all of us joining this podcast today had the pleasure of joining Dan's course. So that's where we already learned quite a lot about the food industry, also from a Cornell perspective. But myself, I've worked in FMCGs before, not so much food related, but more shampoo and so on. But I'm generally interested in the whole industry, like consumer goods industry, and so that's me. Handing it over to Moritz.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Dan. I'm happy to be here today. I'm also from Germany, actually, and I'm with Sonia in the program. And I also had the pleasure to be in Dan's course. And before I came here to Cornell, I had founded my startup doing my master studies together with 4 friends, and it was a food delivery service in Germany for regional products and delivering it to local supermarkets, but also directly to people's front door. And I would probably work later on pursuing a career in an FMCG company. So handing over to Sini.
Thanks, Moritz. I guess I'm the black sheep among the students. I'm not from Germany. I am from Finland, so Northern Europe. I am currently finalizing my master's in management and international business. I specialize in strategy and have absolutely loved getting to know the food and FMCG industry in Dan's course this spring. And food is such an intricate and kind of intimate part of our lives. So I want to continue looking into that industry and seeing how I could perhaps also then change it in the future.
One of the most important topics covered in the survey was plant-based foods. In fact, when asked how important plant-based foods would be to the food industry in the years to come, 42.9% gave the maximum rating of 5, while an additional 41.3% answered with a 4. Sonia shared some insight into the overwhelming popularity of these types of products.
I think it's all about sustainability and our cohort or like our age group. I think as part of our education, we really learn about, like negative consequences of caring about yourself and not about others. And so I think plant-based food is like one major step in the right direction of finding a solution which allows you to have delicious food and still take care of factors like the environment. And I think it's just the overall awareness that was created among our cohort that kind of led to those results. And I personally agree. I think I voted the same. So.
Dan shared a story about his son who became a vegetarian early on in life, highlighting the importance of these types of diets among younger consumers.
I have a son who's in junior in high school, and 2 years ago, he just decided he's going to become a vegetarian. No rhyme or reason other than I think he thought that it was healthier, it was better for him. He was an animal lover, still is an animal lover, and he's still a vegetarian to this day.
Dan's anecdote really highlighted one of the themes we saw in the survey. When asked what type of diet would see the largest growth, 71.4% of respondents responded with vegan and vegetarian. I asked Sini her thoughts on this stat.
I think that's very prevalent in the younger generations. I was delighted to see back in Helsinki, my hometown, at the local university, when suddenly the university cafeteria stopped, for example, offering certain meat products, or only offering certain meat products only on certain days of the week or so on. And this was a student owned organization that was running these cafeterias. So really the younger generations are pushing for these changes to happen.
We also asked students in the survey which product categories they thought would face the biggest challenge from plant based competitors in the years to come. Dairy products garnered 28.6% of the vote, while seafood and shellfish got 12.7% of the vote. Poultry only had 6.3% of the vote, with the clear winner being red meat, with 52.4% of total survey respondents believing it would be the most disrupted category by plant based foods. I asked Moritz why he thought this was.
I think humans have a closer relationship to cows in the end, so they feel it more if they suffer, more than if other kind of animals suffer. So in the end, I think that's one big part of why people start to become vegetarian or vegan, is really how they see how the animals live, and I think that's way more prominent at red meat than with fish or poultry.
We also asked students about low/no alcohol beverages and also the influence of THC/CBD in the food industry in the years to come. The results were somewhat surprising. 33.3% gave CBD and THC a 3 on our 1 to 5 scale when asked how important it would be over the course of the next 5 years. Additionally, 23.8% gave it a 4, while 19% gave it a 2. Sini provided some insight into why these numbers were a little bit lower than the Food Institute was expecting.
Younger generations don't see these products or substances as a novelty because it's legal or not. They've been around for a long time. Their like parents and grandparents have used these products as well, and I don't think some of these products they may not have the kind of the novelty that the legalization has brought as much as it might look from a marketer's point of view.
We also asked students how important they thought low alcohol and no alcohol cocktails, wines, spirits, and beers would be over the next 5 years. This is a trend we've been looking at the Food Institute for most of 2021, and to our surprise, we found that 31.7% of the students gave this a 2 on that 1 to 5 scale, with 3 garnering 28.6% of the vote. Dan shared his thoughts on the matter from a different angle.
I would say from from my age group, I would say that this would probably score a lot higher, maybe post pandemic than during pandemic. But I think consuming less alcohol to be more healthy is certainly a movement that I think an older generation is looking at, and I think that's why you might see some of these big alcohol beverage companies diving into this space. And there's some great products out on the market from Budweiser and the big companies.
One of the issues that we tried to get a better handle on was how important social and political issue engagement would be for food companies over the next 5 years. The students overwhelmingly said it would be very important, with 47.6% of the vote giving it a maximum rating of 5, followed by 28.6% of the vote which gave it a rating of 4. I asked Sonia to try to explain her cohort's thinking on the matter.
I think it's just a very effective way of them to connect with consumers. So I think like the best in class example is Ben and Jerry's. So I think actually already since they were founded, they were kind of positioning themselves on social topics. And yeah, their customers, that's what they love to see. That's what they expect from the brand. It's part of the brand identity. So I think you have brands like Ben and Jerry's where it was always like a bit like a big topic to actually shape the brand identity. But there are more and more brands like jumping on that, like joining the trend. So I think we learned about Pepsi, who had this Kendall Jenner Black Lives Matter ad, which then actually failed because customers didn't perceive it to be authentic. So it's actually like a big risk also for companies to position themselves. But I think just in general, especially because of the importance of social media and people or like consumers want brand, like they want that brands take opinions and that they position themselves. And so, for instance, when there was like the Black Lives Matter movement, like this big social media debates going on last summer, there were so many brands joining it and kind of making very clear this is an important issue. We stand behind it, and so I think it's just part of our 21st century and communicating with brands. And consumers would like to see it, and they connect with brands that way, and they pick brands based on that.
Yeah, I can add to that I think companies are more and more realizing that it's not just about meeting the consumer in what the consumer demand currently is. I think it's also a question of companies realizing their kind of weight in society, their responsibility in society, and taking ownership of that. Um, we all know kind of what the environmental and social damage we as a society can do. So, and there's decades of harm done that we're now trying to undo, and I think companies are now kind of rising up to the challenge of making sure that we will continue to have also decades and centuries ahead of us in being able to still produce those kinds of products or still have those markets and have those brands.
Sustainable sourcing ranked very highly in the survey, with nearly two-thirds of respondents giving it a maximum score of 5. Sonia tried to explain some of the reasoning behind this thinking.
And I think it's also that consumers pick those brands on purpose because, I mean, well, this is not food industry, but Patagonia, for instance, people buy that brand and they wear it very proudly to show off that they are like consumers who care about the environment. So I think with the food industry, this will become more and more important as well, that you buy certain brands because it then shows your guests maybe, or just proving it to yourself that you're a good person. And
And I think also it's becoming more and more a differentiation factor between different brands. How much you put into sustainability and how much effort you put in there, because as you know, like the FMCG market is really competitive, and getting there a specific attribute to get a competitive edge about the other companies, I think that's really also an important point to have an additional sales argument to buy in the end your product.
Somewhat surprisingly, environmental causes were the clear winner of a question asking about the most important social cause for the food industry today, with 85.7% of the vote. Dan shared his thoughts on the divide between the European and US markets on this cause, and then the students provided their insights from their own upbringing.
My thought was we in the States, we haven't adopted some of the climate and packaging and investments in sustainability that you guys have over in Europe. Not near as fast as it is over there.
I'm not so sure about it, to be honest, at least speaking for Germany and Norway and Switzerland. So the European countries I lived in recently. Um, I think what they do is like they have very good recycling systems in place, but they still use so much plastic, and I think there's a lot of room for improvement. But you start to see in the supermarkets that they more and more, like, instead of having plastic bags where you pay like where you put your vegetables, they have reusable bags that you just bring every time. So there's like a slow, but there is some shifts towards being more sustainable and like shopping behavior. But just in general, packages like chocolate is sometimes covered in like 3 plastic layers, and I think there's still some room for improvement. But recycling in general is another topic. Like also plastic bottles in general, like all plastic bottles, all cans, everything is 100% recycled in Germany, for instance. So.
What I will say is that comparing my business studies, both in Finland, which is a country known for its forestry industry and especially making paper and paper products, so we do a lot of packaging for food products. And then my studies here at Cornell, I realized at some point that although we talk about sustainability, and I'm completely in awe of what some of the companies um, large food companies in the US are doing. At the same time, there's a term that I never heard in the US context, and it's closing the loop. And that's something that really was almost bombarded at us in my studies back at my home university. So this idea of not just producing better, but also truly making sure that the whole system works together, that supply chain agents are working together to like one party uses another party's scrap or waste as then an input in their process and so on. So uh, overall, making sure that we're taking better care of our inputs and outputs in those processes.
But there's also this other trend when it comes to sustainability. It's kind of like not buying all the big brands all the time, but buying more locally. And I think that's actually where more at startup is quite interesting. Like going to local farm, he can explain much better than me. But even here in Ithaca, if you go to the local farmers markets, you see a number of young people, like Cornell students, going there, doing a bit of shopping, but also trying the local food there. So instead of just always buying the big brands, the big like chains, and yeah, just going for regional options.
Yeah, I think one big part of buying locally and regionally is kind of the freshness of products. For example, when looking at like salad or fruits, and especially salad loses so fast all the vitamins it has when it's harvested. So the best is to directly consume it directly after the harvest. And if you then look at a really long supply chain, if it's coming from even another country or even another continent, there are a lot of vitamins get lost, and that's also at different products. We're not looking only at salad. So I think that's one big part of looking regionally, but also like when buying regionally, the supply chain is just way shorter, so there's less environmental damage made to through all the transport.
Speaking of transport, one of the topics the survey tried to get a better understanding of was how important food and meal delivery would be over the course of the next 5 years. While it seemed reasonable that food and meal delivery would become less important as the pandemic waned in the US, it really surprised me to find that more than half of surveyed students believed that it would be very important over the next 5 years, with 50.8% of the vote giving it a 5 on that 1 to 5 scale. Additionally, 36.5% gave it a 4 on that 1 to 5 scale, showcasing the incredible popularity of these services and the prediction that they would remain popular in the years to come. Sini provided a rationale as to why grocery and meal delivery would remain important in the next half decade and beyond.
Yeah, this is a great question. I think the pandemic really kind of offered us this opportunity to try completely new consumer behaviors that we maybe weren't really ready to, or the industry wasn't quite there yet. A lot of these services have really boomed during the pandemic, and as we now move back to whatever is normal after the pandemic, I think the true value of these services is to be a supplement to what we already know. As like some people will still want to go to the grocery store and do their shopping, pick out their meats and cheeses and vegetables themselves. But right now, like it's a really nice option to also be able to order certain things online or have a like a store pickup option or have meals delivered to your home. As people go back to work and we're not sheltering so much anymore, we will get busier in life again, and this busyness will then mean we will need to have that convenience. And now that we've gotten kind of a taste of that convenience of having everything delivered to our door and we'll never have to leave our houses ever again, some of that behavior will be a little bit sticky, and we'll want to have that option, even if it is just an option to still have it around to make sure that live our lives the way that it kind of makes sense post pandemic as well.
Yeah, I agree with Cindy. So I think for many, for instance, retail stores, there was large potential in Corona for people to just, for instance, try grocery, like ordering groceries online, because before that there was always a bit of a like barrier that will my food be fresh enough, for instance, and now it turned out it actually does work quite nicely, and they got into the habit. So I think now, for instance, for the retailers, it's all about like making that habit stick and trying to prevent that people go back into their old behaviors. So I think ways of doing that could be, especially now that everything opens up again, just like, yeah, pushing their services with offers, with subscription services, and yeah, or making sure that you have this, or you really make sure that customers understand this omni-channel experience. So what Sini said, that you can go to a shop, but then if you want to buy, like, I don't know, water bottles who are super heavy, that you have them delivered to your place. So I'm kind of changing that habit in a direction that you can have both options.
And I think also one important factor is that just the processes are now kind of optimized of doing ways, and both sides of the stream sees the benefits of it. For example, when looking at local food delivery services, um, like now as they tried it already, the local farmers really see the benefits of selling their products maybe through a delivery service to the customer directly at their village, because it generates them direct revenue, and without partnering with a really big company beforehand, so that which leaves them more flexibility, and also the consumer in the end, to receive the groceries you order directly to your home saves time. And like, I think what Sonia and Sini said, having already experienced the benefits of it, definitely make people stick, or at least use it from time to time. I think you can also see it when looking at, for example, in Europe, at companies like Gorillas, which are kind of exploding in the moment, and are one of the unicorns to just deliver food quite fast.
To close out the conversation, I asked the students to look beyond the survey and provide whatever trends they thought would be important over the next 5 years. Sonia shared what she thought would be most important, and then Sini and Moritz followed suit.
Well, I know that some of our friends here at Cornell take something like a lab-grown meat. Maybe that will become like a disrupting thing. For me, like coming from Europe, one thing that's a big trend is superfoods. So every 2 years or so it changes. So once it's the avocado, and then it's quinoa, and then it's chia, and I think people really start caring about making sure that they get the best nutrition for their body that they can get. So and even just taking those supplements in forms of like pills. And so I think that will, like, just this optimization, the thinking of yeah, my body is a temple, and I have to give the body the best you can get. Yeah, so I think that trend will increase even further in the future.
That's a Sonia, great point. I fully agree, and with that, I think comes this increased focus on what your relationship with food is. So we have become quite far from the the hunter gatherer days of how food was basically produced and harvested and brought to a dinner table. Um, right now, we can get food at any time, anywhere, and a lot of times the food has gone through quite a bit of processing, and there's not a whole lot of transparency in what goes into that process. So I think, especially with this idea of trying to maybe optimize, find your own diet, move away from standard diets, and just kind of really customize your own way of eating. With that also then comes this idea of maybe having more personal relationships with the producers of your food, or the retailers of your food. So um, I'm kind of really enjoying following some smaller food companies online and seeing how they engage with their audience. And these are companies that really do focus on serving maybe more kind of these or serving opportunities for consumers to really optimize their own way of eating, however kind of, or whatever that optimization means for different people.
I think the both mentioned trends are really coming in the future. I see also another trend evolving, kind of the trend of having partly ready-made food. So like high quality food, which in the end just need a little of preparation at home. So people feel they cook themselves, but it's like really convenient. And I think for this, it's important for CPG companies to really also look into this, as more and more products are probably purchased in a bulk and like together to get get everything easy as for one full dish. So I could imagine that this is becoming more and more important.
I let Professor Hooker also give his prediction of what could be important in the years to come.
I might add too, it's still a very ad driven industry. and where does private label come in, or private brands or own brands, and um, how many retailers will take the leap and control more of that relationship they have with their customer. And the good way to do it is what Sini and Sonia and Moritz are talking about, through great quality nutrition and products. They can hopefully, I think, connect with their consumers, create a more loyal and repeat purchase consumer, and that lifetime value will grow over time. So I think it's all connected, but that's a big part of it, I think, too.
And that brings us to the end of this week's episode of the Food Institute podcast. I hope this episode really helped you get a better idea of what the next generation of food industry leaders expect to see in the years to come. Special thanks to Professor Daniel Williams Hooker with Cornell University, and also to Sini, Moritz, and Sonia. If you're new to the Food Institute podcast, please follow, like, and share. And please visit foodinstitute.com to learn more about membership, sponsorship, and advertising opportunities. So until next time, this is Chris Campbell, signing off.